Hi class, this is a lecture about communication in the workplace. It's kind of an outline of chapter 2 in your textbook, just covering, highlighting some key concepts in this chapter. And in this chapter, the author, Hamilton, talks about some types of communication in the workplace, and she also spends quite a lot of time talking about organizational models as kind of the history of management theory, which kind of forms a framework for how communication relates to those various management theories and models. So I think it would be really interesting for you to look at those models and theories and think about how they relate to your particular workplace and how they relate to nursing and the healthcare field, because I think there may be some differences, but there are also plenty of similarities. So I think it'll be very interesting for you to kind of make that comparison. When we're talking about communication inside the workplace, there are three basic ways that formal messages flow: downward, upward, and horizontally. In downward communication, we have messages that flow from managers and supervisors to subordinates. Downward communication adds to employee satisfaction, or at least it has that potential. It can lead to information overload, which is not necessarily bad. It is more effective when written communication is accompanied by face-to-face communication. In upward communication, that of course refers to messages that flow from subordinates to managers and supervisors. Upward communication must be accurate to be effective, and it has to be fast to be effective. Horizontal communication includes messages that flow laterally between persons of the same rank or position, as you see in the graphic in the middle. Horizontal communication is especially valuable when problems are unusually difficult or complex. Empowered teams are especially adept at horizontal communication. Organizations are paying more attention to horizontal communication than they did in the past. And horizontal communication has been made much cheaper and faster with the internet and company intranets. In terms of informal communication in the workplace, this kind of communication is commonly called the grapevine. The type of information carried on the grapevine indicates the health of the organization. The grapevine of a healthy organization is generally personal interest items. The grapevine of an organization with failing formal communication centers on information about the organization. In other words, everybody's trashing the organization and complaining. Information carried by the grapevine is fast, and it's 75 to 95% accurate. People who regularly use the grapevine are more satisfied with their jobs and more committed to the organization. So socializing with your colleagues is a very good thing. And effective managers actually use the grapevine. Now let's talk about the ways that managers coordinate people and groups to achieve maximum productivity. Mutual adjustment is a coordination method of horizontal communication between peers in small organizations to make work-related decisions. It can involve face-to-face meetings or internet meetings. It's used only when needed. Direct supervision is usually more effective if the organization is made up of 12 to 50 members. Standardization is more effective in coordinating organizations of more than 50 members. Video conferencing may be used for communicating standards and training employees. Organizations that use standardization may be more bureaucratic than others. And rapidly changing markets and the need for flexibility are prompting many traditionally standardization organizations to move to mutual adjustment teams. Okay, now we're going to talk about the organizational models, management models, and theories that I referred to in the beginning. And we start with the oldest of these, traditional management. The traditional manager uses control, structure, and money to motivate employees. This traditional, also called the classical model, developed during the early part of the 20th century. The scientific management approach, one of the traditional forms of management, sought to improve organizational efficiency and reduce production costs by standardizing the employee tasks. It was popularized by a guy named Frederick Taylor. Taylor's best way of management included scientific design of each task, scientific selection of workers, training and rewards, and division of labor and responsibilities. And bureaucratic theorists were interested in improving direct supervision through structure and control. Theorists named Henri Fayol and Max Weber popularized this approach. Key concepts are organizational structure, division of labor, chain of command, and a small span of control. Weber's best way of management under this approach formalized bureaucracy. Today, the traditional strategies are still dominant in certain organizations like government agencies, educational institutions, and many firms to enhance productivity. Now, in terms of how communication is done within this traditional framework, in the traditional model, communication is mainly task-oriented and downward, usually written and generally used by managers to clarify orders. The human relations manager believes that employees are motivated by tender loving care, or TLC, and meeting their social and psychological needs. The human relations model focuses on the social and psychological needs of employees. One of the proponents of this way, Elton Mayo, his best way of management disproved the idea that employee productivity could be improved solely by economic motivation and endorsed the idea that tender love and care by managers would lead to increased work productivity. Chester Bernard's best way emphasized the importance of communication to organizational success, but he still viewed it primarily as a one-way tool for management. Today, the open climate of human relations is easier to implement and maintain in smaller organizations, but it's sometimes seen in successful large organizations. You might want to think about some examples of those. As far as communication, in the human relations model, managers view communication as a command tool by managers, and therefore it flows downward. But they also seek feedback and use the grapevine to gauge employee satisfaction. In human resources management, as opposed to human relations management, the manager believes in the team approach that involves employees in problem solving and decision making. The human resources model combines the best of the traditional and human relations models by focusing on workers and management, a team-based orientation. Douglas McGregor developed Theory X and Theory Y, which we see here on the graphic. Theory X managers believe in the traditional model of management, while Theory Y managers believe that when frequent honest communication is up, down, and across, it breeds confidence and trust. Today, the human resources model is seen in various types of participative employee involvement groups. These often have quality in the name, such as total quality management or just kind of a team approach. And they function successfully if the following characteristics are present: horizontal communication between departments, employees willing to work with each other, managers willing to listen, organizations open to change, rapid management response to suggestions, cooperation between management and unions, support for team decisions and solutions, and adequate tools and training for teams. In terms of communication, in the human resources model, information and feedback flow freely in all directions, and the environment is supportive and flexible. Next, we have systems theory and contingency theory, which the author groups together as system/contingency. So the systems/contingency manager believes there is no one best way to manage. The systems/contingency model contends there is no organizational model that will fit all organizations. Ludwig von Bertalanffy's general systems theory is based on the principle that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Daniel Katz and Robert Kahn referred to organizations as open systems. Systems theory recognizes the interdependence of all parts of an organization. That's the key concept there. It acknowledges both formal and informal communication as central to the success of the organization. And it integrates the biases of the traditional and the human relations models and gives them equal weight. Now, contingency theory contends that no one type of structure or leadership is most appropriate for all situations. Fred Fiedler's theory of contingency concludes that managers learn to identify and modify situations to fit their communication and leadership styles. Robert House's path-goal theory asserts that leadership can adapt to fit the situation. The contingency model can be seen in Theory Z companies that adapt their management style to the existing company culture. And contingency model's method of communication is that flexibility is highly valued because there is not a single best way to manage and no single best way to communicate. The transformational manager adapts to new virtual structures by giving employees personal autonomy via computer-connected teams. The transformational model results from the needs of today's business environment to transform past models into new structures. A multi-unit organization is a decentralized structure made up of a number of separate autonomous businesses under the same holding company. The virtual organization is a temporary venture between several companies, each with a special expertise or process specialty. The transformational model today allows small companies to compete with large companies. In the transformation model, horizontal communication among team members is essential. Upward, downward, and informal communication are readily used, and most interactions occur electronically. So this transformational model is the one that you'll want to keep in mind as you do the virtual teams project for this class, because it certainly relates to that project. Well, summing up all that information rather briefly, Being aware of both formal and informal communication is important. And communicating feedback and company expectations differ significantly from management model to management model. And I want to